He had me pressed against the wall before I could finish my sentence. One hand braced above my head, the other cupping my jaw like I was something he was afraid to break and desperate to hold at the same time. His lips were so close to mine I could feel the warmth of them without being touched. And I had both hands flat against his chest, not pushing, not pulling, just feeling his heartbeat, fast as mine. "Tell me to stop," he said. His voice was low, rough at the edges in a way I had never heard from him before. This was not the composed, control man who sat at the end of my bar 3 nights a week and ordered bourbon neat and made me forget what I was doing mid-sentence. This was something underneath that man, something he had been keeping behind glass for a long time. Kesha, just my name. That was all, but the way he said it, like it cost him something, like he had been holding it in his mouth for months and finally ran out of reasons to swallow it back down. My chin was tilted up toward his. My lips were parted. I was already leaning, barely, just a fraction, in a direction I had told myself 100 times I would never go. "I have been losing control," he said, "since the first night I touched you." And that was when I understood that whatever this was, it had already started long before tonight, long before this wall, long before I thought I was the one deciding anything. The question was never whether this was going to happen. The question was what it was going to cost us both when it did. Welcome to our channel, where we bring you emotional stories that stay with you. The kind that feels like a secret whispered in a quiet room. The kind you carry with you long after the last word. If you are new here, hit subscribe and the notification bell so you never miss a story. And if you are returning, thank you. Your presence here means everything. Now stay until the end. Drop a comment with your thoughts, and let's begin. I was not supposed to still be in Houston. That was the thing nobody knew. When I landed here 5 years ago with one bag and enough cash to cover 3 months of rent, I told myself it was temporary, a place to breathe, a city where nobody knew my name or my face or what had been done to me. I would stay long enough to figure out my next move, and then I would go somewhere else and start over properly. 5 years later, I was still here, still bartending 3 nights a week at a private members club downtown, still going by Kesha Monroe instead of Kesha Hargrove, still sleeping with my bedroom door locked even though I lived alone on the 14th floor of a building with a doorman. Old habits from an old fear do not die just because the immediate danger passes. The club was called Calloway. I did not think anything of a name when I took the job. I was hired through a staffing agency that paid cash and asked no questions, which was the only kind of job I was willing to take back then. The club was beautiful in that quiet, expensive way that does not need to announce itself. Dark wood, low lighting, the kind of place where serious people came to have conversations they did not want overheard. I was good in that environment. I knew how to be present without being noticed, how to pour a drink and disappear into the background of someone else's evening. My regulars liked me because I remember what they drank and never asked what they did for a living. I liked them because they never asked what I did before this. It was a fair arrangement. Grayson Calloway first sat down at the end of my bar on a Wednesday night in early fall. I remember because Wednesdays were usually slow, and I had been reorganizing the back shelf out of boredom when I heard the stool pull out. He sat down the way men with real money sit down, without looking around first, without performing comfort, just settled into the space like it already belonged to him, which, as I would eventually find out, it did. But I did not know that then. "Bourbon," he said. "Neat." He did not specify a brand. I poured him the good one without asking. He noticed that too. I could tell by the way his eyes moved from the glass back to me, just briefly, the way you look at someone who answered a question you did not ask out loud. He was handsome in a way that registered before I could stop it. Mid-30s. Sharp jaw. Hazel eyes that were doing something quiet and attentive that I was not used to seeing in men who looked like him. He had the kind of face that had probably opened every door he had ever walked toward. But he was not wearing it like a weapon the way some of them did. He just looked tired. Genuinely tired. The kind that does not come from a bad night's sleep. I went back to my side of the bar. He drank slowly. Did not look at his phone the way everyone does now. Just sat there with his glass and whatever was running through his head. And I left him alone because that was clearly what he needed. An hour passed. He ordered a second. When I set it down, he said, "Quiet night." "They usually are on Wednesdays," I said. "You prefer it that way?" I looked at him. Most people who ask bartenders questions like that are really just looking for an invitation to talk about themselves. I had learned to tell the difference in the first 5 words. He was actually asking. "Some nights," I said. He nodded like that was a complete answer. Like he understood that some nights the quiet is a relief, and some nights it sits on your chest. He did not push for more than I gave him, which is the first thing about Grayson Calloway that I noticed before I knew his name. He stayed another 40 minutes, finished his second drink slowly, left a tip that was generous without being the kind of generous that is trying to say something. He said good night the way people do when they mean it, and not just as a formality. I watched him walk out. Then I stood there for a moment with a clean glass in my hand and realized I had stopped drying it at some point without noticing. I put it down and told myself it was nothing. He came back Friday. Same stool, same bourbon. This time we talked a little more. Nothing deep, just the surface of things. The way you do with a stranger in a quiet bar when the night has nowhere to be. He told me he had grown up on the East Coast and that Houston still surprised him sometimes. I told him Houston had a way of doing that. He asked if I was from here. I said no. He did not ask where I was from. That was the second thing I noticed. I went home that night and made myself a late dinner, rice and leftover shrimp, and sat at my kitchen counter and thought about how long it had been since a conversation with someone new had felt that easy. Not exciting, not charged, just easy, like something that fit without effort. It made me careful. Easy was how it started the last time, too. The time that cost me everything. So I noted it, filed it away somewhere behind my sternum, where I kept things I was not going to act on. Told myself he was just a regular, a good tipper, a man who knew how to sit still and drink his bourbon and leave on time. Nothing more than that. But the following Wednesday when the door opened at 8:15, and I looked up before I could tell myself not to, I already knew it was him. And I had already reached for the good bourbon before he sat down. By the 3rd week, he was coming in 4 nights instead of 2. I noticed, but I did not say anything about it. That was not my place. Members came and went on their own schedules, and it was not my job to track patterns or read meaning into them. That was what I told myself on the drive home on a Thursday night, when I realized I had been watching the door for 20 minutes before he walked through it. I made a rule, no watching the door. I broke it every time. His name came to me accidentally. One of the older members, a man named Gerald who came in every Tuesday for single malt and sports talk, clapped him on the shoulder one night while passing and said, "Calloway, good to see you," without breaking stride. Something shifted in my chest when I heard it. Not because the name meant anything to me then, just because having his name made him more real than I wanted him to be. Grayson Calloway. I did not look him up that night. I almost did. I had my phone in my hand twice. But there was a version of me that understood, in a quiet, practical way, that looking him up would turn him from a man I enjoyed talking to into something I would have to make a decision about. And I was not ready to make a decision. So I put my phone face down and went to sleep. He came the following Wednesday, and I poured his bourbon before he sat all the way down, and he looked at the glass, and then at me with something close to amusement pulling at the corner of his mouth. "You always do that," he said. "Do what?" "Have it ready before I ask." "You always order the same thing," I said. "Most people still ask." I shrugged. "Most people waste time." He smiled then, a real one, the kind that moves from the mouth up to the eyes and stays there for a moment. I picked up a glass and started drying it and looked somewhere else because that smile was the kind that required distance to be safe around. We talked that night about things that did not matter and somehow mattered completely. He told me about his brother, without telling me his brother's name, just that he had one, younger, that he'd been going through something hard, and that the helplessness of watching someone you love move through pain you cannot fix was its own particular kind of exhausting. He said it plainly, without drama. The way people talk about things they've been carrying so long the weight has become familiar. I understood that kind of weight. I did not tell him so. But I think he saw it in my face anyway, because he looked at me for a moment after he said it with the expression of someone who just recognized something in a stranger they were not expecting to find. "Sorry," he said. "That got heavy." Do not apologize, I said, heavy as honest. He was quiet for a beat. Then, tell me something true. I looked at him. That is a dangerous thing to ask a bartender, I said. I know, he said. So I told him something small and real about my mother, about how every Sunday morning her voice on the phone was the thing that kept the week from feeling like it was happening to someone else, about how she made sweet potato pie every fall and mailed me a care package every month, even though I was grown, and she acted like I might forget to eat without her intervention, about how Atlanta in October smelled like her kitchen, and I missed in a way that lived in my body more than my head. He listened the way people rarely listen, without preparing his response while I was still talking, without waiting for his turn, just taking in what I was giving him like it was worth something. When I finished, he said, "She sounds like someone who loves fiercely." "She does not know any other way," I said. He nodded slowly, looked down at his glass, then back up at me. "I think you are the same," he said quietly. I did not answer that. I picked up my clothes and moved to the other end of the bar and told myself the heat in my face was from the lighting. It was not from the lighting. That was the night the line between regular and something else began to blur in a way I could not unsee. I did not cross it. I was too careful for that. 5 years of building walls had made me precise about where I stood and why. But I could feel it, the way you can feel a current in water before it moves you anywhere. 3 weeks later, the private event ran late, and the rest of the staff cleared out by 1 a.m. It was just the two of us in the low light of the empty bar. I was wiping down the counter. He was on his last drink. Neither of us moved toward leaving. "You never told me," he said. "Told you what?" "Something true. Not about your mother. About you." I kept wiping the counter, even though it was already clean. "I am a very boring person," I said. "You are the least boring person in this room. You are the only other person in this room." "My point stands," he said. I laughed before I could stop it. He looked pleased with himself in a way that was not arrogant, just warm, like making me laugh was something he'd quietly been working toward and was glad to have finally gotten. I put down the cloth. I looked at him across the bar, and for one moment I let myself just look, not the careful managed glance I had been giving him for weeks. Actually looked at the loosened collar, the tired eyes that were less tired than they used to be when he first started coming in, the way he held his glass, the way he had been sitting at that same stool for a month now and never once made me feel like I owed him anything for it. "I used to have a whole other life," I said, "before this." He did not move, did not shift or lean in, or do any of the things people do when they sense something coming that they've been waiting for. He just said, "I know." Not like he knew the details, like he knew the shape of it, the way people who have also left something behind recognize in each other, without needing the full story. "I do not talk about it," I said. "You do not have to," he said. And that was the moment, not a dramatic one, not a kiss or a touch or a declaration. Just a man sitting at the end of a bar at 1 a.m. telling a woman she did not have to explain herself to him. That was the moment I was already in trouble. I just did not know yet how deep the trouble went, or how long he had already known my name before he walked through that door and pretended it was the first time. It happened on a Friday. The bar was quieter than usual. A light rain had been hitting the windows since 9, and it had kept most of the regulars home. By 11:30, it was just Grayson at his usual spot and 2 older members in the far corner deep in a conversation that had nothing to do with anyone else in the room. I do not know exactly how to explain what the rain does to a quiet space. It makes everything smaller somehow, closer, like the world outside has agreed to leave you alone for a few hours, and what is left is just the warmth and the low light, and whoever is sitting across from you. He had been watching me all night in that way he had, not aggressive, not performing, just present, the way you watch something you are trying to hold on to before it moves. At some point, the 2 members in the corner paid their tab and left. At some point, the rain got heavier. At some point, I stopped pretending I was busy. We talked for a long time about nothing and everything the way that only happens late at night when the guards come down on their own without you deciding to lower them. He told me more about his brother, not the financial details, just the human ones, what his brother's laugh sounded like. How he used to call Grayson at 2 in the morning just to talk, and Grayson used to complain about it, and now would give almost anything to have that call come through again. He said it looking at the bar top, and not at me, and his jaw was tight in the way jaws get when a man is feeling something he has not fully given himself permission to feel. I reached across the bar, without thinking, and put my hand over his. Just for a second. He looked up, and something in the space between us shifted so completely and so quietly that I felt in my sternum before I understood what it was. I pulled my hand back. He did not say anything about it. He just looked at me with those hazel eyes that had been taking me apart piece by piece for a month, and I looked back at him, and the rain kept hitting the windows, and the bar was empty, and I was so tired. Not sleepy tired. The deeper kind. The kind that comes from holding yourself at a careful distance from everything for so long that the effort of it becomes the whole of your existence. I was so tired of being careful. He came around to my side of the bar. I do not remember which one of us moved first after that. I do not think it matters. What I remember is his hand finding my jaw. The way he tilted my face up toward us like he had been thinking about exactly that angle for longer than either of us would admit. The wall at my back. His forearm above my head. The city rain outside and the low amber light inside. And the way his eyes dropped to my mouth and stayed there like a man who had made a decision and was no longer pretending otherwise. "Tell me to stop," he said. I did not tell him to stop. What happened next was not reckless the way people make those moments sound in stories. It was not wild or desperate. It was quiet and certain and felt like something that had been true for a while before either of us said it out loud with our bodies. Like we were not starting something new, but finally admitting something that had been there since the first night. He sat down, and I poured his drink without asking what he wanted. I woke up in his penthouse at 5:40 in the morning. The city was gray outside the floor, the ceiling windows. His side of the bed was empty, but still warm, and I could hear his voice from somewhere else in the apartment, low and professional, already on a call at this hour, already the version of himself the world got to see. I lay there for a moment looking at the ceiling of a room that cost more than my entire apartment building and felt the specific quiet of a woman who knows she has done something she cannot undo. Not regret exactly. Something more complicated than regret. I got dressed in the pale, early light, found my shoes, my bag. I moved through his apartment carefully, taking in details I had not seen the night before. The books on the shelf that were actually read, spines bent, pages marked. The single-frame photograph on the console table near the door, 2 boys, one older and serious, one younger and grinning, standing in front of the lake somewhere green and far away. The empty coffee cup on the kitchen counter that told me he had been awake for a while before I was. I was almost in the elevator when he came out of his office. He was still in last night's shirt, sleeves rolled, phone in hand. He looked at me the way you look at something you were hoping would still be there when you turn around, and were not completely sure it would be. "Stay," he said. Just that one word. I looked at him across the length of his living room. This beautiful, composed man with his penthouse and his morning calls and his life that was so far outside of mine that I could not see the edges of it from where I was standing. And underneath all of that, the man from last night, the one who talked about his brother's laugh, the one whose jaw went tight when he felt things he had not given himself permission to feel. "I have to go," I said. He did not move to stop me. He just stood there and watched me press the elevator button, and when the doors opened, he said my name once, quietly, the way he had said it the night before against the wall. I stepped inside. The doors closed. I drove home in the early morning gray and sat in my parked car outside my building for a long time. Engine off, keys in my lap. The rain had stopped and the streets were wet and empty, and I sat there trying to locate the version of myself who had very good reasons to stay away from men like Grayson Calloway, and could not quite find her. She was still there. I knew that. But she had gotten very quiet sometime around 1 in the morning when he put his hand on my jaw. I went upstairs, made coffee, called my mother even though it was too early because I needed to hear her voice and could not tell her a single thing about why. Diane Hargrove answered on the second ring the way she always did. Like she had been expecting me, like she had been sitting there with the phone nearby just in case. "Baby," she said. Just that, and I held the phone against my ear and closed my eyes and did not say anything for a moment, and she let me have that silence the way only mothers know how to. "I am okay, Mama," I finally said. She made a sound that meant she did not fully believe me, but loved me too much to push. We talked for an hour about nothing. About the sweet potato pie she was planning to make. About the neighbor's dog that kept getting into her garden. About the gospel choir at her church that had a new director who was changing things up, and the church mothers had opinions about it. By the time I hung up, the sun was fully up and Houston was awake, and I had almost convinced myself that last night was a moment that would stay in its lane. Something that happened. Something I would carry quietly and carefully and keep separate from the life I had built here. Then my phone buzzed. A number I did not have saved. One message. 4 words. I meant what I said. I stared at it for a long time. Then I put my phone face down on the counter. But I did not delete the message. And that was how I knew I was already in more trouble than I was willing to admit to myself. He came back to the bar the following night. I had spent the entire day preparing for that, deciding exactly who I was going to be when he walked through that door. Professional, warm but distant. The version of me that had survived 5 years of keeping everything at arm's length and was very good at it. I had the whole thing mapped out in my head by the time I tied my apron and clocked in. He sat down at his usual stool. I poured his bourbon without looking at him. He did not say anything for a while, just sat there the way he always did, comfortable in silence in a way most people are not, and I moved up and down the bar taking care of the other members and told myself I was doing fine, that this was manageable. That one night did not have to become a conversation. Then the bar quieted down around 10, and there was nobody left between us, and nowhere else for me to be, and he looked at me in that direct way he had, and said quietly, "Are we going to pretend last night did not happen?" I was not planning to pretend anything. I said, I was planning to be professional. Those are not the same thing? No, I said, they are not. He considered that, turned his glass slowly on the bar top. "I meant what I said this morning," he said, "in the text." "I know. Did you read it?" "I read it." And I looked at him then, really looked at him the way I had been carefully not doing all evening. "Grayson," I said, and the way his name felt in my mouth was already a problem. "I do not do this. I do not have the kind of life where I do this." "What kind of life do you have?" "A quiet one," I said, "a careful one. One that works because I keep it simple." He was quiet for a moment. "Simple," he repeated, not mocking, just turning the word over like he was examining it. "Yes." "Is that what you want?" he asked. "Or is that what you settle for because it felt safe?" The question landed somewhere it was not supposed to land. I picked up a cloth and wiped down a section of bar that did not need wiping. "You do not know enough about my life to ask me that." I said, "You are right," he said. "I do not, but I would like to." I stopped wiping. "Kesha." His voice dropped lower, the way it had the night before, that register that bypassed every sensible thought I had, and went straight to the place underneath where all the things I did not let myself want were living quietly in the dark. I have been coming into this bar for a month. I have sat on that stool and talked to you and listened to you and watched you, and I have not felt like this about anyone in longer than I can remember, maybe ever. And I am not a man who says things like that. Ask anyone who knows me. I do not say things like that. The bar was very quiet. "I am not asking you for anything you are not ready to give," he said. "I am just asking you not to make last night into something smaller than it was. Because it was not small. Not for me." I stood there with a cloth in my hand, and my heart doing something loud and inconvenient in my chest, and looked at this man who had no idea what he was asking me to step out of. What it had cost me to build the small, safe life he was calling simple. What was waiting on the other side of letting someone in again. "I need to think," I said finally. "Okay," he said. He finished his drink, left his usual tip, said good night the way he always did. At the door, he paused and looked back once. Not to say anything, just looked, the way you look at something you are leaving in someone else's hands and hoping they will take care of it. Then he was gone. I drove home that night and did what I had not let myself do the night before. I sat down at my kitchen table and I looked him up. Grayson Calloway, CEO of Calloway Holdings, 3rd generation, private equity, real estate, financial services. Net worth listed in one article as somewhere between 4 and 6 billion. Offices in Houston, New York, Boston. Philanthropic work done quietly with no press attached to it. Reputation in business circles for being controlled, precise, and unexpectedly fair. I read for an hour, and then I found something that made me stop. A business profile from a few years back that mentioned, in passing, an early investment vehicle that Calloway Holdings had been connected to through a shared fund. The name of that fund was familiar to me in the way that certain names never fully leave you no matter how hard you try to forget them. Aldridge and Voss. I read the sentence 3 times. Then I closed my laptop and sat in the dark of my kitchen and told myself it did not mean anything. Business connections in that world overlapped constantly. A shared fund years ago did not mean anything. It did not mean he knew those people. It did not mean he was connected to what they had done. It did not mean anything. I went to bed and lay there staring at the ceiling and told myself that until almost 4 in the morning. The next night, I called in sick for the first time in 2 years. I spent the day digging, not casually, not the way a person looks someone up out of curiosity, the way I used to work, methodically, layer by layer. The part of my brain that had been a forensic accountant for 8 years before they stripped it all away from me woke up like it had never been asleep, and I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop and 3 notepads, and I pulled every thread I could find. The Calloway and Aldridge Voss connection was old and appeared clean on the surface. A co-investment in a legitimate fund years before the fraud. Nothing that pointed directly to knowledge or involvement. But then I found the name Richard Voss, senior partner. One of the 3 men who had signed the internal order that ended my career and my life in New York. The man whose face I had memorized the way you memorize the face of someone who has hurt you badly enough that you never want to be caught off guard by them again. I had seen that face 2 weeks ago, at my bar, walking in and greeting Grayson Calloway like a man greeting someone he had known for a long time. I sat back in my chair. The kitchen was very quiet, and then the thought that I had been holding at a distance for the last hour moved all the way in and sat down and would not be moved. He owned this club. Calloway Club. I worked in a building with his name on it, and I had never once looked up who owned it because I was hired through an agency, and the paperwork never crossed my desk, and I had been so careful about so many things for so long, and I had missed the most obvious thing sitting directly in front of me. He owned the bar I worked in. He knew my name before he ever sat down. I reached for my phone. I put it down. I picked it up again. I sat on my kitchen floor. I counted 11 minutes on the bathroom floor of a life I thought I had finally made safe, and then I got up because I was done sitting on floors. I called him the next morning, not from the kitchen floor, not from the place of panic and cold hands and a chest that felt like something was sitting on it. I made coffee first. I stood at my window and watched Houston move through its morning, and I breathed until my hands were steady. Then I called. He picked up on the first ring. Kesha. He said my name like he had been waiting for it, like he had been sitting somewhere with his phone nearby just in case. The same way my mother answered. That similarity did not escape me, and I did not have time to think about what it meant. I need you to meet me, I said. Not at the bar. A pause. Short but present. Tell me where, he said. I chose a coffee shop in Midtown that I had been to twice, and had no particular attachment to. Neutral ground. Somewhere with enough people around that neither of us would have to perform composure entirely alone. I got there 20 minutes early and took a table in the corner and ordered something I did not drink and sat with my hands flat on the table and went over what I was going to say. He walked in at exactly the time I told him to. He saw me before he reached the table, and something changed in his face. Not guilt exactly. More like a man who has been carrying something heavy for a long time and can feel that he is about to be asked to set it down. He sat across from me. I did not give him time to speak first. I put my phone on the table between us. His name, the club ownership, the Voss connection. The timeline laid out simply and plainly the way I used to present findings in boardrooms before all of that was taken from me. I had not lost a skill, just a venue. When I finished, I looked at him and said, "How long have you known who I am?" He did not look away. That was the thing I had not expected. Every version of this conversation, I had run through in my head the night before I had him looking away at some point. He did not. Before the first night, he said. The coffee shop carried on around us. Someone at the counter laughed at something. A chair scraped the floor 2 tables over. The world kept moving the way it does when something inside you goes very still. I found you through an investigation, he said. I came to the bar to make contact, to ask for your help. And everything else, I said. My voice was even. I had decided it would be even, and it was the month of conversations. The night you came around to my side of the bar. All of it, you knew the whole time. He did not flinch. Yes, he said. I knew. Why? It was not really a question. It was the sound of a woman who needed to hear a man explain himself, even though she already understood that no explanation was going to make the floor feel solid again. He told me about Weston then. All of it this time. Not the shape of it the way he had at the bar. The actual contents. The $40 million his brother had lost to an Aldridge and Voss shell fund. The spiral that came after. The 2 stints in Colorado. The 18 months Grayson had spent building a private investigation because he did not trust the official channels that had already failed once when I tried to use them. The way my name had come back to his investigator as the only person who had seen inside of those accounts before they wiped everything clean. I listened to all of it without moving. When he finished, I said, Your brother lost $40 million. Yes. I lost my entire life. I said, my career, my city, my name. 5 years of existing in a place where nobody could find me because I was not safe if they did. Your brother lost money. I lost who I was. He absorbed that, did not deflect it or qualify it, or try to make the comparison smaller than it was. You are right, he said. There is no equivalence. What happened to you is worse. Full stop. Then why? I said, did you sit at my bar for a month and let me trust you before you told me the truth? The question sat between us on the table like something solid. He was quiet for a long moment. Because the first night I walked and I had a plan, he said slowly. Introduce myself carefully. Explain the investigation. Make the professional case for why working together served both our interests. That was the plan. He paused. And then you poured my drink before I asked for it, and you talked to me like I was just a person, and by the end of that first night, the plan felt like the wrong instrument for what was actually happening. So you kept coming back. Yes. Without telling me. Yes. And you let me think. I stopped. My jaw tightened. I looked at the table for a moment, and then back at him because I had decided I was not going to look away either. You let me think it was real. It was real, he said. Quiet and certain. Everything that happened between us was real. Kesha, I did not manufacture that. I could not have manufactured that. What I did was withhold the context. And I know what that cost you. I know what it feels like to you right now, and I am not going to sit here and tell you that you are wrong to feel it. I picked up my phone from the table. I stood up. I need time, I said. I know. I am not promising anything on the other side of that time. I know that too, he said. I walked out into Houston midday and sat in my car and did not drive anywhere for a long time. I had done that a lot in the last 5 years. Sat in parked cars trying to locate myself, trying to find the place inside where the next decision was supposed to come from. I drove home. I went to the back of my closet. Behind my winter coats and a box of books I had carried from city to city, without ever unpacking, was a small fireproof lockbox that I had owned for 6 years. I had the key on the same ring as my apartment key, so I would always know where it was. I had not opened it since I moved to Houston. I had told myself when I put it in that closet that opening it would mean I was ready to fight, and I was not ready to fight. I was ready to survive. Those were different things. I sat on my bedroom floor with the lockbox in my lap. I thought about Grayson Calloway, who had lost money he would never fully recover from. I thought about the city workers and teachers and hospital employees whose pension funds had been quietly emptied by people in good suits who knew nobody would trace it back quickly enough to matter. I thought about the junior partner named Marcus Webb who had used my evidence to protect himself and left me with nothing and was currently living very well in Dallas. I thought about the woman I was before all of it, the one who was good at her work and proud of it, The one who found a missing dollar in a billion-dollar portfolio, like it was a game she was born to play. The one who had reported what she found because it was the right thing to do and had paid for that with everything. I thought about what it would mean to open this box. Not just legally, not just professionally. What it would mean for Kesha Monroe to stop existing. What it would mean to be Kesha Hargrove again in public, in the light, with her name attached to a federal investigation, and her face in the financial press, and nowhere left to hide. I thought about Grayson sitting in that coffee shop, not looking away. I opened the box. The hard drive was exactly where I had left it, small and black, and containing 5 years' worth of the thing that had destroyed me and might now be the thing that finally ended it. I held it in my palm for a long time. Then I picked up my phone and called a number I had not dialed in 5 years. My old colleague, the one person from my previous life I trusted completely, a woman named Patricia, who had left the firm 6 months before everything fell apart and had since built a quiet but serious legal practice in Washington. She answered on the third ring. "Kesha," she said, and then after a pause, "I was wondering when you were going to call." "I need a lawyer," I said. "A good one." "You are talking to her," Patricia said. I exhaled for what felt like the first time in 5 years. "There is someone else involved," I said. "A man named Marcus Webb. He is in Dallas. What is on this drive takes down all of them, including him." Patricia was quiet for a moment. I could hear her thinking. "Send me everything," she said. "Tonight." I looked down at the hard drive in my hand. "Okay," I said. I hung up. I sat there on my bedroom floor in the afternoon light, coming to the curtains, and felt something move through me that I did not have a clean word for. Not relief, not courage, something older than both of those things. The feeling of a woman who has been still for a very long time, finally deciding to move. I got up off the floor. I had somewhere to be. I showed up at his office without calling first. His assistant, a composed young woman named Claire who looked like she had been trained to manage exactly this kind of situation, stood up from her desk the moment I walked off the elevator and told me Mr. Calloway was in a meeting and did not have anything on his schedule until 3. "Tell him Kesha is here," I said. "He will come out." Claire looked at me for a moment. Then she picked up her phone. He came out in under a minute. He was in a full suit this time, the boardroom version of himself, the one the world got to see. But when he saw me standing in his reception area with a hard drive in my hand and 5 years of decision written across my face, something in him shifted immediately, and the boardroom fell away, and it was just him again, the man from the bar, the one whose jaw went tight when he felt things. "Clear my afternoon," he said to Claire without looking at her. He held his office door open. I walked in. His office was exactly what I expected, and nothing like it at the same time. Floor-to-ceiling windows facing the Houston skyline. Clean desk. No clutter. But the books were real here, too, same as his apartment. Actually read. Actually lived in. A single-frame photo on the credenza behind his desk. The same 2 boys from the lake. Older version of the same image. I put the hard drive on his desk. "There is someone you do not know about," I said. "His name is Marcus Webb. He was a junior partner at the firm when everything happened. He helped me disappear. I trusted him with partial copies of the accounts because I was scared and I needed help, and he was standing right there telling me he wanted to expose them from the inside." Grayson was very still. "He did not expose anything," I said. "He used what I gave him to negotiate his own quiet exit package. He protected himself with my evidence and left me in a city where I did not know anyone with nothing. He is currently in Dallas doing very well." Something moved through Grayson's expression that was quiet and cold and absolute. "What is on that drive?" I said. "Takes down all of them. The 3 senior partners. The shell accounts. The pension fund transfers. Marcus Webb. Everything. It is all original documentation that predates anything they wiped. Patricia, my lawyer in Washington, has already seen the file index. She says it is enough." Grayson looked at the hard drive on his desk, then at me. "Why are you giving me this?" he said. "Because I am tired of hiding," I said, "and because what they did to your brother and to all those people deserves more than a fine and a settlement and 3 men who keep their houses." He held my gaze. "And because I need to stop being Kesha Monroe," I said quietly. I need to go back to being myself. I cannot do that while this is still sitting in a box in my closet. He crossed the room slowly, stopped in front of me. Clothes. The way he had been in the bar that first night, when the distance between us stopped making sense. I could see the careful way he was holding himself. Not reaching, not assuming, just present. I am sorry, he said, for how I found you. For sitting at that bar knowing what I knew and letting you trust me before I told you the truth. There is no version of that I can justify. I am just sorry. I looked at him for a long moment. I know, I said. I am not over it. I know. But I am here. Something in his face broke, open quietly, not dramatically. The way things break open when they've been held closed for a very long time, and the effort of it finally becomes greater than the fear of what is underneath. He reached up and touched my face, just his hand against my jaw the way he had that night at the bar, gentle and certain at the same time. I need to tell you something, he said. Okay. I came into that bar with a file on you, he said. And somewhere between the first night and the fourth and the 10th, I stopped being the man with the file. And I did not know what to do with that, because I had not felt anything real in so long, I almost did not recognize it when it was standing right in front of me pouring bourbon I did not ask for. I did not say anything. I am in love with you, he said. Not with who I needed you to be for the investigation. Not in spite of what happened to you. With you, Kesha Hargrove, the woman who counts minutes on bathroom floors and calls her mother too early and laughs when she is not expecting to, and survived something that would have finished most people, and then walked into my office today anyway. The Houston skyline sat behind him in the afternoon light. I thought about the bathroom floor, the parked cars, the Sunday phone calls I made to a mother I could not tell the truth to. The hard drive is in a box in the closet. 5 years of Kesha Monroe and all the quiet, careful work of staying invisible. I thought about what it was going to cost to step out of all of that. I already knew the answer. It was going to cost something real. Something that did not have a clean resolution. There would be press. There would be fear that did not fully go away. There would be a board that put together a file on me and a mother in Boston who had done the same, and a world attached to this man that I would have to learn to stand inside without losing myself again. It was going to cost both of us something we could not get back. But I was already here. I had already opened the box. I know, I said, and then after a moment, I am in love with you too. I did not plan it. I did not want it. But I have been since somewhere around the 4th Wednesday when you asked me to tell you something true and actually listen to the answer. He exhaled, long and slow, like a man setting down something he had been carrying for a long time. He pulled me in, and I let him. His arms around me and my face against his chest, and the Houston afternoon outside the windows, and everything still ahead of us, complicated and real and ours. We stood like that for a while. Neither of us said anything else because there was nothing else that needed saying right then. Sometimes the most honest thing two people can do is stop talking and just be in the same place without performance or agenda or anything left to prove. That was us, in his office, on a Thursday afternoon, with a hard drive on his desk and a federal case about to open and a board meeting coming that he would walk into and choose me in front of every person who would try to make me into a liability. All of that was coming. But right then it was just us. 3 months later, the Aldridge and Voss indictments dropped on a Wednesday morning. 3 senior partners. Federal charges across 4 counts. Marcus Webb was named separately in a related filing out of Dallas. His lawyer released a statement by noon. Nobody believed it. Carter Whitmore resigned from the Callaway board quietly on a Friday. 3 sentences. No drama. Grayson did not comment publicly. He did not need to. Patricia called me the morning the story ran in the financial press. My name was in the 4th paragraph. Not as a criminal. As a forensic accountant whose preserved documentation broke the case open. She read it to me over the phone, and I sat at my kitchen table and listened and did not say anything for a moment after she finished. Kesha Hargrove, Patricia said quietly. Welcome back. I pressed my hand flat on the table, felt the solidity of it. Thank you, I said. Eleanor Calloway came to Houston 6 weeks after that. She showed up at Grayson's penthouse on a Saturday morning with a bottle of wine from the family cellar and a handwritten card, and she looked at me in the doorway for a long moment with those same hazel eyes her son had, and said that what had been done to me was wrong, and that she had added to it, and she wanted me to know she knew that. It was not an apology. Eleanor did not do apologies, but it was the truest thing she could offer, and I took it without letting her off too easily, and she respected me for that. I could see in the way she looked at me after. We ate dinner that evening, the three of us, at the kitchen island. Takeout from my favorite soul food place on the south side. Oxtails and collard greens and mac and cheese and cornbread that was almost as good as Diane's. Eleanor ate everything, wrote down the name of the restaurant in her phone, without being asked. My mother came to Houston the following month. Diane Hargrove walked into Grayson's apartment and looked at him for about 4 seconds before she pulled him into a hug that lasted long enough that he did not quite know what to do with his hands. He looked at me over her shoulder with an expression I had not seen on him before, undone in the best possible way. She made sweet potato pie in his kitchen that evening. The real one, the one from the recipe she had never written down because she said it lived in her hands, not on paper. Grayson ate 2 pieces and told her it was the best thing he had ever eaten in his life, and Diane said, "I know," with the absolute confidence of a woman who has never doubted her sweet potato pie. I stood in the doorway watching the two of them at his kitchen counter and felt something move through my chest that was quiet and full and did not have a single clean word for itself. My firm opened on a Tuesday morning in early spring. Hargrove Forensic Consulting. The nameplate on the door was clean and simple and had my real name on it in letters I could see from the elevator. I stood in front of it for longer than was probably necessary on the first morning, just stood there and looked at it, at my name, in a building I had chosen, in a city I had stopped hiding in. Grayson was standing behind me. He did not say anything, just put his hand on the back of my neck the way he did sometimes, warm and steady, and let me have the moment without turning it into something else. That was one of the things I had learned about him. He knew when to be present and when to be quiet and how to tell the difference. It was rarer than it sounded. The last night of the story is not dramatic. That is the point. It is an ordinary night some months after everything. His apartment. Late. The city doing its quiet thing outside the windows. We had eaten dinner at home, oxtails I had made from a recipe his mother had sent me after that first Houston dinner, which was its own kind of miracle. The dishes were done. The lights were low. I was lying with my head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat, slow and even. He had one hand in my hair and was reading something on his phone with the other, and the television was on low in the background playing something neither of us was watching. Just a night, the kind of night I had not let myself have in 5 years, because having ordinary nights meant having something to lose, and I had not been willing to have something to lose. "What are you thinking about?" he said. "Nothing," I said. He made a sound that meant he did not believe me. "I am thinking about how quiet this is," I said. "In a good way. I did not think I was going to get quiet like this again." His hand moved slowly in my hair. "You thought you were going to be running forever," he said. Not a question. "I thought the version of me that got to have this kind of night was gone," I said. "I thought she was one of the things they took." He was quiet for a moment. "She was just waiting," he said, "in Houston, behind a bar, pouring bourbon for men who did not deserve her attention." I laughed. He felt it against his chest, and I felt him smile even though I was not looking at his face. Outside, Houston carried on. Somewhere across the city, my new office sat dark and locked with my name on the door. Somewhere in Atlanta, my mother was asleep with the gospel channel, on low the way she always slept. Somewhere in Dallas, a man named Marcus Webb was meeting with his lawyers and running out of options. Somewhere, 3 senior partners of Aldridge and Voss were waiting for court dates that were not going to go well for them. All of that was real. All of it had cost something. But right here, in this room, in this ordinary quiet night with his heartbeat under my ear and the low television and the city outside doing nothing dramatic at all, Kesha Hargrove was home. Not because of where she was, because of who she finally got to be again. She closed her eyes, and for the first time in 5 years, she did not check the door. What would you rate this story? Drop 0. to 10 in the comments right now. If this story moved you, hit subscribe for more emotional journeys every day. And if it truly touched your heart, consider leaving a super thanks. Your support helps us create more stories like this. Every contribution, big or small, means the world. Ready for the next story? It is even more dramatic than this one. Click now. Thank you for being part of this journey.